Okay, this is kind of I want to make a point about this. So I've taken the MCAT before, and so I understand what I know what the Gestalt principles are, but what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to make connections, um, or I'm trying to understand how the test writers think, and so I'm really trying to go down into what the videos are kind of like what is being said in the videos because there should be some kind of clues to understanding what will be on the exam just based off of how they think, right? Now, in the last video, there was an example of a cube, and you'll see that we'll encounter some situations where we see similar images, right? That's Gestalt principles. Those types of images require some kind of background knowledge to influence our perception. So I just wanted to preface that when understanding um, what it means when we're talking about Gestalt principles, it potentially means that we're talking, it's a top minded process, right? So he's saying laws, right? So law is very, very that's 100% a top-minded mindset, right? So anything theory-based or law-based, I think is really important to understand and think from the person that made it. That's a perspective, and that's going way more deep down into understanding the truth behind top-minded processing. Okay, I think what I'm going to do for this video is explain why it's this law and why it's not that law, because that's I think I've encountered some questions on the MCAT where I got it wrong just because um, I didn't think that way. Like I wasn't. I think when you're determining an answer to a question, you have to compare it to another law. Um, so let's compare it to the cube, right? If I were looking at, or actually, we have to figure out what the next law is. So let's wait. So that's before I go into comparison. Whenever we see the 5 Olympic rings, we always associate that with the Olympics. We don't ever, like the guy was saying, we don't ever like we're not look we don't look at a logo and then we're like, oh hey mom, I can take this part out, this part out, this part out, this part out. Right? It's not a very immediate thing, right? So, but that thought process exists. So I think what it's trying to say here is that our mind reduces it to the simplest form, if possible. Now, if I have a question saying, okay, why is it pragnas and why is it not similarity? Well, let's go back here, right? Why is it not that I can say, oh, hey, this line goes here, 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 right? I can argue that, right? But the example that the test makers make that they're giving us are these examples. So I think it's really important, again, it's a reminder to understand that we have to understand, what the Khan Academy videos are saying, what the test makers want us to understand, um, in order for us to understand what's actually on the exam itself. And that's proven. That's proven on a level of just like from my past experience of like reading Kaplan books and reading external sources, but also understanding that even when I do look at like what the Khan Academy videos are saying and what they're talking about, it's important not to go too far into. There's a limit. It's important to understand like, hey, this is not like we can't make that same assumption because it's example based. It's an example based exam. So yeah, that's why I would choose. So if I have something similar to like Olympic rings or a logo, if anything similar comes up to mind like that, um, if the example connection is stronger, then that's going to be the right answer. And so, again, understanding that similarity is things that are similar are grouped together, and also understand that things aren't really, it's not really noticeable here. That's the main reason. But if anything goes more further than that in terms of misunderstanding, um, it really should be an equal decision making between the definition and the examples that are given. Okay. So items that are similar, right? Those are circles, right? And nothing to do with closeness, right? These are the others that are close. So do you see how my mind immediately retracts and defends itself against things that like theories that are similar? That's a kind of like a thought process that is inherent. Um, and should be practiced against when especially in like multiple choice questions, not just with. It's a perfect way to demonstrate how to do that for these principles. Right. So going back to what we're understanding about how we're splitting our understanding, the example is that, okay, we have just circles, right? And so we understand that because we just have circles, there's nothing that we're comparing similar against, right? So we practice that. And we're also understanding that, hey, this is the example that's given. So we have multiple circles here, right? So It's the law of proximity that allows us to understand that, this example as well. Also, understanding that we can't go too far into understanding, hey, this looks like the Olympics rings. Okay, if I just look at that, then that's the law of Pagnaz. No. You're taking the example and you're taking it too far. Um, so, yeah. Yeah, and it follows the definition as well, right? So, example definition. Really, at the end of the day, that's all you need to know. Okay. So, I'm actually gonna, like, I think this is kind of funny because a lot of these images are lining up perfectly with what I'm saying. They're all testing how different they are from each other, each of the previous law, right? So, and I'm gonna prove it because for the similarity one, right, we have different shapes. Then we go here, and then we know that it's not the similarity because it's just circles. But these are all both circles. So how do we compare proximity and continuity, right? The this image, there's no smooth path, right? So there's no continuity. This has to do with proximity. And because that there's a smooth path, again, we're defining this by the thing, right? That's the example, right? Now, if we have any other further thoughts, we can go back to the example as a basis of understanding. And so that's the key thing here, right? We're not talking about the color, we're talking about the smoothest path, right? And we see that the angle is what we're talking about here. And so as we continue learning, we're going to get more and more and more and more of these types of like test paths, right? And so the key important thing again is it's a definition and it's the example that we always have to refer back to. Okay, so this is again, this is exactly similar to the example that we saw with the top-minded mindset, right? So it goes back. So again, this is like another test, right? But the framework that we want from this understanding, from my understanding of what others think, right, is essentially what this test comes down to. Is that there's a definition example. The definition is that objects are grouped together and seen as whole. If we compare to our similarity grouped together, right? How are they different? Well, let's look at the example. The example shows that there should be something that should be filled in, but it's not. Um, and then this is not that. These are that the items are similar themselves, right? And so we drew multiple items together. So we can make new definitions and stuff, but at the end of the day, those are just connections between what is the example and what is the definition.